Welcome to Cluster Comparison. Today we are going to be looking at My Last Duchess and Ozymandias. If you are making notes, please make a note of the following headings: speaker, situation, structure, poetic device, language device, and context. So let's begin. In My Last Duchess, the speaker created is one duke, and this duke addresses a listener several times. One example is where he says, "Will it please you rise?" But even though this is a question, there is the impression that he's going through the motions of polite etiquette, but believes himself superior to who he's talking to, because there is nothing in the line immediately after that indicates he has waited for a response or even expects a response. This speaker is not created as a reflective speaker, but rather one who is rhetorical, as in he will speak, he may ask a question, but he's not really expecting an answer. It is only his voice that counts. In Ozymandias, Shelley creates three main speakers. He begins with a reflective speaker. He then moves on to an informative speaker. This continues by introducing a ruthless speaker, the voice of Ozymandias, but the poem ends with the voice of a reflective speaker to be the last voice heard. This isn't by accident. Shelley wants us to recognize that this speaker, who uses the language boundless and bare and nothing beside remains, is the reflective voice that is always heard in history long after the despotic dictator voice has ended. Let us look at situation. In My Last Duchess, Browning creates a dramatic monologue in which the Duke is revealing to the person responsible for negotiations for his new wife, the Duke is revealing to him information about his former wife. The situation we have created in Ozymandias is that you have a man who meets another man, and beginning with "I met a man" and continuing to say what that man then said, creates the impression that this is perhaps a chance meeting, and it was almost unlikely that the first speaker would ever have potentially heard about Ozymandias or this derelict statue were it not for this chance meeting. And again, Shelley is not doing anything by accident. He wants us to recognize that history relegates the rulers, the despotic rulers, the ruthless rulers, to a footnote in society, and it is very rare that these rulers are remembered. If we look at structure, we have in My Last Duchess, whilst it's a very long poem, a long stanza even, each line, bar one, uses iambic pentameter. Now, there is one line, and it is the line, "would draw from her alike the approving speech." This line is ever so slightly out. It has one more syllable in it, and it is the line that throws off the immaculate, if you like, speech of the Duke. And so we look at the content in that line, and it is her behavior that, if you like, has broken the Duke and pushed him to murder, pushed him over the edge to murder. If we look at the structure of Ozymandias, we have again another stanza, but this obviously is a much shorter stanza. And it is the classic sonnet, reflecting love, but not love from one person to another, but love for himself, Ozymandias, and love for his empire. If we look now at the heading Poetic Device, we'll look at the use of enjambment, where Browning ends one line with "'twas not," and it is where the line breaks at the word "not." He is categoric that whatever comes next, it was not that there was nothing that comes next that was able to do anything about what the Duchess did. So we look at what begins the second line. So with enjambment, we're looking at what the second line opens with, and it opens with her husband. Here, he begins this line with himself, showing that despite the fact that he was not enough to stop her doing what she did, he's begun the line, and therefore he believes he's important enough to have done that, and possibly cannot understand why. So the enjambment here reflects two things. One, what was not sufficient to stop the wife's behavior, but that he felt his position was powerful and important enough to do it. If we look at the poetic device in Ozymandias, we have the Volta in line 12, which is brutal in exposing the lie of the ruler Ozymandias, just the line above, in which he claims that he is king of kings and that people should look on his works, the mighty ruler should look on his works and despair. Shelley wants the reader to recognize that ruthless and despotic rulers will say and make many statements and definitive statements, but immediately on saying those, it is easy to reveal and expose the lie within. If we look at language device in My Last Duchess, we have the Duke referring to his wife with the use of pronouns throughout the poem. There are 19 references to his wife, only one in which he refers to her as the Duchess. All other references are her and she. And what this does is Browning creates this very emotionless reference from a husband about his wife. And if we look at the language device in Ozymandias, we have the use of the adjective shattered before the word visage. On the surface, shattered is making a reference to the broken nature of the head in the sand. But the word broken wasn't used, it was shattered. And what Shelley does is create this impression of it is broken beyond repair. It cannot be put together again in any way resembling what it was before. That is the head. If we think about what that represents, as in Ozymandias' empire, his empire will never stand as it did before when he was alive and had it so. If we look at context finally for My Last Duchess, status at the setting of the poem, if you like, was often recognised by the acquired items that were prized because of their price and their beauty, or maybe their rarity. The Duke, in killing his wife, what he's done is to ensure that he has all three elements in his painting. Perhaps something he feared he would not have if his wife had lived, and therefore status would have been affected. If we look at context for Ozymandias, what we have is the idea that Shelley, the artist, believed devoutly in the idea that the sword, or rather the pen, was mightier than the sword, and therefore that the work of the artist would withstand the test of time. And so his poem is a tribute to this idea that no matter how vast an empire might be and how much strength was used to create that empire, what remains is the power of the artist.